There is something happening inside your body right now that has nothing to do with your age, nothing to do with genetics, and nothing to do with bad luck. And yet it may be the single most important reason why you wake up exhausted, why your memory feels like it is wrapped in a heavy fog, why your joints ache before you even get out of bed, why your skin suddenly started doing things it never did before, and why no matter how many doctor visits you schedule or medications you take, you still don't feel like yourself anymore. What if everything you've been told about just getting older was actually obscuring a real, measurable, scientifically documented biological crisis that is not only fixable, but is already being reversed by thousands of seniors who simply got the right information at the right time? Because that is exactly what is happening, and today I am going to tell you everything they found out. My name is Dr. Marcus Hale, and I have spent over 3 decades working in functional and integrative medicine, specifically with adults over the age of 60. And in all those years of clinical practice, there is one root mechanism I have encountered more consistently than any other at the center of unexplained suffering in seniors: a quietly failing gut barrier that is doing something most people find genuinely shocking when they first hear it. It is letting your gut's internal environment bleed directly into your bloodstream. Not metaphorically. Literally, I am going to walk you through 7 hidden warning signs that your gut wall has already begun to break down. Signs that are so commonly misdiagnosed as normal aging that even excellent physicians overlook them every single day. And by the time we reach the last 2, you are going to understand something about your own body that will permanently change the way you think about your health from this moment forward. I also want to say this clearly before we go any further. Every single intervention I share with you today can be started for free, without a prescription, without a specialist referral, and without any dramatic lifestyle upheaval. Small, specific, scientifically grounded steps that work with your biology, not against it. So stay with me, because this is not another video full of vague advice. This is the conversation your body has been waiting for you to have. Let's talk about what is actually happening inside your gut right now, because the biology here is both fascinating and deeply important to understand. Your intestinal lining is a structure of extraordinary precision. It is a single layer of specialized cells called enterocytes, and those cells are connected to each other by protein complexes called tight junctions. Think of tight junctions like the grout between ceramic tiles on a bathroom floor. When the grout is intact, nothing gets through the gaps. Water stays out. The surface remains sealed and protected, but when the grout begins to crack and crumble, water seeps through, moisture gets under the tiles, damage spreads, and suddenly a floor that looked perfectly fine from the outside is rotting underneath. That is exactly what happens when your gut's tight junctions begin to degrade. The gaps between enterocyte cells widen, and suddenly things that were never supposed to cross into your bloodstream begin doing exactly that. Undigested food proteins, fragments of bacterial cell walls called lipopolysaccharides or LPS, fungal particles, metabolic waste products, all of it seeping through a wall that was designed to stop them. And your immune system, which has more tissue lining your gut than almost anywhere else in your entire body, detects these intruders immediately and responds with inflammation. The problem is that when your gut is chronically leaking, that inflammatory response never stops. It becomes a permanent background roar. And that low-grade, whole-body fire is what researchers at the University of Bologna famously named inflammaging, the chronic systemic inflammation that is now recognized as one of the primary biological drivers of accelerated aging itself. A landmark peer-reviewed study on intestinal permeability biomarkers found that zonulin, the primary regulator of tight junction integrity and the most reliable blood marker of gut permeability, is measurably and significantly elevated in healthy adults over 60, even before any disease has been diagnosed. Read that again. Even in seniors who had no diagnosed illness, gut permeability markers were already elevated, meaning the wall was already beginning to fail. Now combine that with a 2024 analysis from researchers studying the relationship between gut microbiome disruption and biological aging, which found a direct statistical link between increased intestinal permeability and accelerated cellular aging, measured not just by symptoms, but by actual biological age markers. The gut is not just connected to your digestion. It is connected to how fast every cell in your body is aging right now. So let's talk about the warning signs, because knowledge without recognition is not useful. You need to be able to see these signs in your own life. And the first one is so common that most people have stopped even mentioning it to their doctors because they have been told so many times that it is nothing. If you experience persistent bloating, that pressurized, uncomfortable, swollen feeling in your abdomen that seems to have no clear trigger and shows up after almost any meal, regardless of whether you ate something healthy or not, your gut wall may be sending its earliest and clearest distress signal. Here is the mechanism. When tight junctions loosen and bacterial fragments begin entering the bloodstream, your immune system deploys inflammatory messengers called cytokines to neutralize the perceived threat. Those cytokines act locally in the gut as well as systemically, and the local gut inflammation disrupts the normal coordinated muscle movements of your intestinal wall, a process called peristalsis, causing food to move irregularly, gas to accumulate, and your abdomen to distend in ways that feel deeply uncomfortable and that no amount of antacids or gas X will resolve long term, because the root cause is not excess acid or excess gas. The root cause is immune-driven intestinal inflammation secondary to barrier breakdown. A study published in Frontiers in Immunology found that elevated LPS levels in the bloodstream, the direct consequence of a compromised gut barrier, were present in the majority of patients presenting with chronic unexplained bloating and irregular digestion. The single most immediately impactful thing you can do about this today is to eliminate two specific categories of food additives from your next grocery run: emulsifiers and artificial thickeners, specifically polysorbate 80 and carboxymethyl cellulose, which appear in an enormous range of processed, packaged, and convenience foods, and which have been shown in multiple peer-reviewed studies to directly degrade the intestinal mucus layer and accelerate tight junction breakdown. This is not a dramatic dietary overhaul. It is one ingredient check. Start there. The second warning sign takes us from your gut into your brain, and what happens in this connection is genuinely one of the most important things modern neuroscience has uncovered in the last decade. If you have noticed that your thinking feels slower than it used to, that words seem harder to find, that you walk into a room and forget why you came, that reading feels like pushing through mental sand, you may have been told this is simply the normal cognitive softening of aging. It is not always that. Your gut and your brain are connected through a two-way communication superhighway called the gut-brain axis, mediated primarily through the vagus nerve, a sprawling neural cable that runs from your brainstem all the way down through your chest and into the wall of your intestines. Through this axis, your gut sends more signals to your brain than your brain sends to your gut. When your gut is healthy, those signals support calm focus, clear memory consolidation, and emotional regulation. But when LPS and other gut-derived toxins begin entering the bloodstream through a failing gut barrier, they travel to the brain, cross the blood-brain barrier, which itself becomes more permeable with age, and trigger a process called neuroinflammation. Inflammation in the brain doesn't look like redness or swelling that you can see. It feels like fog. It feels like forgetting. It feels like a mind that used to be sharp and quick, that now requires enormous effort to do things that once felt effortless. Research published in respected neuroscience journals has shown that elevated circulating LPS levels are directly correlated with accelerated cognitive decline in adults over 65, and that seniors with confirmed gut barrier dysfunction score measurably lower on standard cognitive assessments than age-matched peers with intact gut barriers. And critically, studies have shown that restoring gut barrier integrity is associated with measurable improvement in cognitive performance scores, not just subjective feelings of better thinking, but objective test improvements. Think about what that means. Brain fog that your doctor attributed to age may actually be gut-derived neuroinflammation that can be addressed at its root. The practical step here is to begin adding 1 tablespoon of cold-pressed, high-quality extra virgin olive oil to your daily diet, consumed raw, drizzled over food rather than cooked at high heat. The compound oleocanthal in genuine high-quality olive oil has anti-neuroinflammatory properties that operate through multiple pathways simultaneously, and it also provides direct support for intestinal tight junction integrity. It is one of the most powerfully dual-acting foods available to you, and it costs less per day than almost any supplement you could buy. The third warning sign is one that sits at the intersection of your gut, your immune system, and your joints. And it is one that causes enormous suffering in the senior population that is almost universally misattributed. If you wake up in the morning with joint stiffness that takes an hour or more to loosen, if your knees, fingers, hips, or lower back ache, with an inflammation quality that feels deeper than ordinary wear and tear, if your rheumatologist has used words like idiopathic inflammatory arthritis, or seronegative inflammatory joint disease, meaning inflammation of unclear origin. Your gut may be the hidden source. Here is how the connection works at the biological level. When LPS fragments enter your bloodstream, they are detected by a category of immune cells called macrophages. These macrophages respond by releasing powerful pro-inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines, particularly TNF-alpha and interleukin-6. These cytokines are not localized. They travel through the bloodstream and have an exceptionally high affinity for synovial tissue, the lining of your joints. When cytokines flood joint tissue, the synovial membrane becomes inflamed, fluid accumulates, cartilage faces increased oxidative stress, and pain and stiffness are the result. The crucial point here is that this is not an autoimmune error. This is your immune system responding correctly to real gut-derived toxins that should never have been in your bloodstream in the first place. Treat the joints without treating the gut, and you are suppressing symptoms of a fire without ever looking for what is generating the smoke. Research from the field of rheumatology and integrative immunology has consistently demonstrated that elevated intestinal permeability markers are significantly associated with systemic inflammatory joint conditions, and that targeted gut barrier restoration leads to measurable reductions in circulating IL-6, one of the primary inflammatory drivers of joint pain. The immediate zero-cost action you can take today is to add one daily serving of cooked prebiotic vegetables to your meals, specifically cooked garlic, lightly cooked onions, or cooked green leafy vegetables, all of which provide fermentable prebiotic fiber that feeds the specific species of gut bacteria responsible for producing butyrate, the short-chain fatty acid that serves as the primary fuel for your intestinal epithelial cells and is essential for maintaining tight junction strength. Less butyrate means a more fragile gut wall. More butyrate means a stronger, better sealed barrier. And you can begin increasing your butyrate production today simply by eating one extra serving of cooked vegetables with your next meal. The fourth warning sign is the one that most seniors describe as the most demoralizing because it is the one that makes every other challenge harder to face. I am talking about the kind of fatigue that sleep does not fix. The exhaustion that greets you in the morning before you have done anything, that crashes you in the early afternoon regardless of what you ate or how long you rested. The bone-deep tiredness that your doctors have investigated and found no thyroid problem, no cardiac issue, no anemia to explain, and yet it continues every single day like a weight you cannot put down. There are two intersecting mechanisms by which a leaking gut creates this kind of persistent, treatment-resistant fatigue, and understanding both changes how you approach the problem entirely. The first is immune metabolic drain. When bacterial LPS is continuously entering your bloodstream through a compromised gut barrier, your immune system is running an around-the-clock response. Immune activation of this scale is extraordinarily metabolically expensive. It consumes nutrients. It redirects energy resources that your muscles, brain, and organs need to function, and it does so invisibly in ways that no amount of rest can compensate for because the underlying demand never pauses. It is exactly like having a powerful application running in the background of your phone that you cannot see, draining the battery constantly even when the screen is off. You charge it all night and it is already depleted by morning because the drain never stopped. The second mechanism is serotonin disruption. Most people associate serotonin with mood, but this neurotransmitter plays an equally critical role in regulating energy, sleep architecture, and the sense of physical vitality. Approximately 90 to 95% of your body's total serotonin is produced not in your brain but in your gut, specifically by specialized enterochromaffin cells in your intestinal lining. When that lining is damaged and inflamed, serotonin synthesis drops. And low gut-derived serotonin does not just make you feel low in mood. It creates a specific quality of exhaustion that feels different from physical tiredness. It feels like a motivational dimming, a flatness that makes everything feel harder and less rewarding. Research from respected medical institutions has shown that adults with elevated intestinal permeability markers report dramatically higher rates of chronic fatigue compared to age-matched controls with healthy gut barriers, and that restoration of gut barrier integrity through targeted probiotic and dietary intervention is associated with significant improvement in self-reported energy levels within weeks. This is not anecdotal. This is measurable, repeatable, and clinically documented. The single most impactful thing you can do right now to begin rebuilding your gut microbiome and restoring serotonin precursor production is to add one serving of naturally fermented food to your daily routine. Plain, unsweetened yogurt with live active cultures, a small serving of sauerkraut from the refrigerated section rather than the shelf-stable jar, or a tablespoon of kefir, each of these introduces billions of live beneficial bacteria directly into your gut environment. This is not a supplement. This is food. It requires no prescription, no special equipment, and no significant expense. Start with a single serving tomorrow morning and maintain it consistently. Consistency is the entire game. The fifth warning sign is one that tends to arrive later in the progression of gut barrier dysfunction, but when it does arrive, it tends to alarm people deeply because it looks and feels like something entirely unrelated to digestion. If you have developed new skin rashes, eczema-like flares, unexplained hives, recurring inflammatory skin conditions that appeared after the age of 60 when your skin was previously healthy, or if you have been flagged for early autoimmune markers without a clear diagnosis, a significant and growing body of research points toward the gut as the foundational origin. Here is why. When a chronically leaking gut floods the bloodstream with diverse foreign antigens, pieces of bacteria, partially digested food proteins, fungal fragments, your immune system works continuously to identify and neutralize them. But your immune system, particularly as it ages through a process researchers call immunosenescence, is not infinitely precise. In a mechanism called molecular mimicry, immune cells trained to recognize gut-derived toxin fragments can begin misidentifying proteins in your own body's tissues as similar enough to warrant an attack. Skin tissue is particularly vulnerable to this form of immune mistargeting. Thyroid tissue is vulnerable. Nervous system tissue is vulnerable. And the research connecting gut permeability to autoimmune development is no longer fringe science. A study from the National Institutes of Health found that adults with confirmed intestinal hyperpermeability were significantly more likely to develop new autoimmune markers over a multi-year follow-up period than those with intact gut barriers. Research published in dermatology journals has shown that patients with chronic inflammatory skin conditions demonstrate substantial improvement in skin symptom scores after gut barrier restoration therapy, improvements that far exceed what is achieved with standard topical treatments alone. And the reason is straightforward. You cannot resolve an immune reaction on the surface of your body while the gut trigger that is driving that immune reaction continues feeding the fire beneath it. The practical action here is to begin a daily practice of 5 minutes of slow diaphragmatic breathing before your largest meal. Breathe in for 4 counts through your nose. Breathe out for 6 counts through your mouth. Do this for exactly 5 minutes before you sit down to eat. This is not a wellness trend. This is a clinically studied neurological intervention. Slow breathing of this pattern activates the vagus nerve, shifts your nervous system from sympathetic activation into parasympathetic mode, increases digestive enzyme production, reduces gut-derived inflammatory cytokine output, and measurably improves gut barrier function over sustained practice. A controlled study from a major California research university found that this exact breathing pattern before meals led to measurable reductions in gut-derived inflammatory markers within 4 weeks. Your gut heals in a parasympathetic state. It cannot repair effectively when your nervous system is in stress mode, and slow breathing is the fastest, most accessible way to shift that state on demand. The sixth warning sign is one that rarely gets discussed in any gut health context, and yet it is one of the most revealing signals that the gut barrier has begun to fail in a deeper, more systemic way. I am talking about mood instability, persistent low mood, anxiety that appears without an obvious cause, irritability that seems disproportionate to circumstances, or a general emotional flatness that has settled in over the past few years, and that antidepressants either don't fully address or create side effects that make them feel like a poor trade. Your gut is not just producing serotonin. It is producing over 30 different neurotransmitters and neuroactive compounds including GABA, the primary calming neurotransmitter of your nervous system, dopamine precursors, and a range of short-chain fatty acids that directly influence how your brain regulates stress and emotional response. When your gut barrier is compromised and your microbiome has been depleted, which happens steadily after the age of 60 in a process called dysbiosis where beneficial bacterial populations collapse and opportunistic bacterial populations expand, the production of these mood-regulating compounds drops significantly. Research from major institutions has documented the direct correlation between microbiome diversity loss and increased rates of anxiety and depression in older adults, and the mechanism is now well understood. A less diverse gut microbiome produces fewer calming neuroactive compounds, generates more inflammatory signals, and puts the gut-brain axis under the kind of chronic stress that eventually recalibrates your emotional baseline downward. The most effective dietary intervention for microbiome diversity recovery that you can begin implementing today is to deliberately increase the variety of plant foods in your weekly eating pattern, not the quantity, the variety. Research from the American Gut Project, one of the largest microbiome studies ever conducted, found that adults who ate 30 or more different plant foods per week had dramatically more diverse gut microbiomes than those eating fewer than 10. You do not need to eat 30 plants today, but you can add one new plant food this week that you don't normally eat, a different vegetable, a new legume, a handful of mixed seeds, and then add one more the following week. Diversity is the goal, and it compounds beautifully over time. The seventh and final warning sign is the one I consider the most important of all, not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is the earliest, the subtlest, and the most consistently ignored. And by the time most people realize it was a warning, years of cumulative damage have already occurred. I am talking about disrupted sleep, specifically the kind of disrupted sleep where you fall asleep without difficulty but wake repeatedly between 2 and 4 in the morning, or where your sleep feels shallow and unrefreshing even when you log enough hours, or where you notice that your dreams have become more vivid, disturbing, or emotionally intense. Your gut microbiome regulates the production of melatonin precursors, it governs the rhythm of serotonin to melatonin conversion in the pineal gland, and it communicates directly with the regions of the brain responsible for sleep architecture through the vagus nerve. When your gut barrier is leaking and your microbiome is disrupted, these signaling pathways are compromised in ways that fragment the architecture of your sleep at its deepest structural levels. You may not feel it as insomnia. You may feel it as never quite reaching the deep, restorative sleep your body desperately needs for cellular repair, immune function, memory consolidation, and hormonal regulation. And here is the critical connection that makes this the foundational warning sign. Poor sleep accelerates gut barrier dysfunction. A 2024 analysis of the relationship between sleep disruption and intestinal permeability found that even moderate sleep fragmentation was associated with measurable increases in intestinal permeability markers within 72 hours. Sleep deprivation increases cortisol, and elevated cortisol directly degrades tight junction integrity. A compromised gut produces worse sleep quality. Worse sleep quality further degrades the gut barrier, and the cycle deepens with every passing month, silently, invisibly, in a way that feels exactly like getting older when it is actually getting worse. Breaking this cycle is possible, and the starting point is the same gut restoration approach that addresses every other sign on this list, because the gut is the root, and when you heal the root, the branches begin to recover. Adding magnesium glycinate, which is absorbed through the gut and which supports both tight junction protein synthesis and melatonin precursor availability, has been shown in multiple studies to improve both sleep architecture and gut barrier integrity simultaneously. This is one of the most powerfully dual-acting supplements available to seniors. It is inexpensive, it is widely available without prescription, and it is exceptionally well tolerated even at therapeutic doses. Begin with 200 milligrams taken 30 minutes before bed and discuss the dose with your healthcare provider if you have kidney concerns. Now let me bring everything together, because what you have just heard is not a list of isolated problems. It is a single story told 7 different ways, each chapter describing a different downstream consequence of the same upstream failure. A gut barrier that has been eroded by age, by processed food additives, by medication side effects, by chronic stress, by antibiotic exposure, and by the natural decline of microbiome diversity that accelerates after 60. Persistent bloating is that barrier sending its first distress flare. Brain fog is your gut flooding your blood with toxins that cross into your brain and ignite neurological inflammation. Joint pain that doctors cannot fully explain is your immune system responding to gut-derived LPS with whole-body cytokine release that has found a landing zone in your synovial tissue. Chronic fatigue that sleep cannot touch is your immune system running an endless metabolic response to a gut that never stops leaking. Unexplained skin reactions and autoimmune flares are your immune system, overwhelmed and imprecise, beginning to turn its attention toward your own tissues. Mood instability and emotional flatness are the neurotransmitter consequences of a gut that has stopped producing the compounds your brain needs to regulate itself. And disrupted, unrefreshing sleep is the foundation of the entire cycle, the mechanism that prevents every other aspect of recovery from gaining traction. These 7 signs are not 7 different problems. They are 7 windows into one problem. And the interventions are not 7 different regimens. They are one coherent strategy. Seal the gut barrier, restore microbiome diversity, reduce the chronic inflammatory burden that is driving every one of these symptoms, and give your body the conditions it needs to do what it was built to do, which is to heal. You are not too old for this. The biology does not care about your age. It cares about the inputs you give it. The research from the leading aging science institutions in the world is pointing in one clear direction. Gut health is not a separate domain from heart health, brain health, joint health, skin health, or mental health. It is the biological foundation beneath all of them. Seniors who restore gut barrier integrity are not just feeling better digestively. They are measurably reducing their inflammaging burden, slowing cellular aging, improving cognitive scores, decreasing joint inflammation, and recovering the kind of energy and clarity that they had accepted as permanently lost. That recovery is available to you. It begins with the steps we discussed today. Remove the emulsifiers that are actively destroying your mucus layer. Add 1 serving of fermented food to your daily routine to begin rebuilding your microbiome. Eat 1 additional serving of cooked prebiotic vegetables to feed the bacteria that produce butyrate and seal your gut wall. Add a tablespoon of high-quality extra virgin olive oil raw to your daily eating. Practice 5 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing before your largest meal to activate your vagus nerve and shift your gut into repair mode. Increase the variety of plant foods in your weekly diet to rebuild microbiome diversity. And consider magnesium glycinate in the evening to support both sleep architecture and tight junction integrity simultaneously. None of these steps cost significant money. None of them require a specialist appointment. All of them are supported by peer-reviewed research. And all of them work together because they all target the same root. I want to hear from you right now. In the comments below, tell me which of these 7 warning signs you recognized in your own life, and tell me which one surprised you the most. I read every comment personally, and your story may be exactly what someone else scrolling through this page needs to hear to realize they are not alone, and that what they are experiencing has a real explanation and a real path forward. If this video gave you even one piece of information that shifted your understanding of your own health, please take 5 seconds right now to like it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss the research-backed information your doctor may not have time to share, and send this to one person you care about who has been struggling with any of these symptoms and accepting them as just the price of getting older. They do not have to accept that. Neither do you. Your body is not surrendering. It is communicating. And today, you just learned how to listen.